Across the French Creole islands of the Caribbean, Trinidad, St. Lucia, Dominica, Martinique, there's one old warning that still gets repeated to men walking home alone at night. If you meet a beautiful woman on a dark country road and something about her doesn't feel right, look at her feet before you do anything else. She's known across the region as La Diablesse, the Devil Woman, and she is one of the most enduring and specific legends in all of Caribbean folklore. Today, I'll take you through what she is, how she chooses her victims, and one specific night on a lonely country road that's still told exactly the same way generations later. Descriptions of La Diablesse are strikingly consistent across islands that don't even share the same official language. She appears as an elegant, strikingly beautiful woman dressed in fine, old-fashioned colonial clothing, a long, full skirt, an elaborate blouse, delicate gloves. Her face is almost always shadowed by an enormous, elegant, wide-brimmed hat, hiding her features just enough to feel deliberate. She's often described walking alone on quiet country roads late at night, moving with unusual grace and confidence for someone entirely by herself. From a distance or from behind, she's described as simply breathtaking, the kind of figure that makes a man slow down and look twice. But there is one detail hidden beneath that long skirt that every single version of this legend agrees on completely. One of her feet is entirely human, the other is not. It's a cloven hoof, exactly like a cow or a goat. She's careful, deliberately careful, about which foot she lets a man glimpse first, and in which order she takes her steps. La Diablesse doesn't chase anyone. She doesn't need to. Her method is much quieter and far more effective. She waits along isolated country roads, crossroads, or the edges of sugarcane fields, places men often walk alone late at night. The most repeated versions, her preferred targets are men who are out somewhere they probably shouldn't be, leaving another woman's house, stumbling home from a rum shop, having strayed from their own wife. That detail isn't incidental. Across nearly every telling, she's described as a very specific kind of punishment, aimed squarely at unfaithful or careless men. She simply appears on the road ahead or falls into step beside a man, speaking softly, complimenting him, asking harmless questions about where he's headed. Men describe an overwhelming, almost hypnotic pull to keep walking beside her, to keep talking, without any clear reason why. She leads gently and without ever seeming to rush, further and further from the main road, deeper into darkness. And by the time a man realizes how far he's actually walked, he's usually already lost, standing at the edge of a ravine, a cliff, or dense, unfamiliar cane field. Some tellings end there, with men found wandering, confused, and disoriented at dawn, miles from where they started, with no memory of how they got there. Other, older versions end far worse. Men who walked off a cliff edge in the dark, still under her spell, convinced they were simply following a path. One widely repeated rural Trinidad version tells of a young man named Joseph, a story retold in different forms across generations. A young man named Joseph was walking home late one night from a neighboring village along a quiet stretch of road bordered by tall sugarcane. He had, by his own later admission, spent the evening somewhere he probably shouldn't have, and was in no hurry to explain himself to anyone waiting at home. As he walked, he noticed a woman ahead of him on the same empty road, moving with an elegance that seemed strangely out of place for the hour and the location. She wore a long, old-fashioned dress and an elaborate, wide-brimmed hat, her face turned just slightly away from him the entire time. Joseph, curious and more than a little charmed, quickened his pace to catch up, calling out a polite greeting into the dark. She answered him in a soft, pleasant voice, without ever fully turning her face toward him, and simply continued walking at the same unhurried pace. They talked as they walked, about nothing in particular, and Joseph later admitted he couldn't clearly remember most of what was actually said. What he did remember was how easy it felt to keep walking beside her, far past the point where he should have turned back toward home. At some point, without meaning to, he glanced down at her feet as they walked, half out of simple habit, half out of an instinct he couldn't explain. One foot, in the moonlight, looked perfectly ordinary in its worn leather shoe. The other, half hidden beneath the hem of her skirt, did not. He caught only a glimpse. Something narrow, dark, and unmistakably not human, moving where a human ankle should have been. Every hair on his body stood up at once, and every story his grandmother had ever told him came flooding back in a single terrifying instant. He remembered from somewhere deep in childhood memory the one piece of advice given for exactly this situation. Turn your clothes inside out immediately without stopping to think. Without breaking stride, Joseph pulled his shirt over his head, turned it inside out in the dark, and yanked it back on as fast as his shaking hands allowed. The moment he did, according to his own account, the woman's pleasant voice cut off mid-sentence, replaced by something closer to an animal shriek of frustration. He didn't wait to see what happened next. He ran, blindly, back the way he'd come, until the lights of the village finally came into view ahead of him. When he looked back, once, from the safety of the first house lights, the road behind him was completely, silently empty. Versions of La Diablesse appear under different names across nearly every French Creole-speaking island in the Caribbean, with strikingly consistent core details. In Dominica and St. Lucia, she's sometimes called La Diablesse, a Creole contraction of the French La Diablesse, the devil woman. Some folklorists trace her origins directly to French colonial folklore, brought across the Atlantic and reshaped by the specific realities of plantation society. In that reading, she represents something more layered than a simple monster, a warning aimed specifically at powerful, unfaithful men who felt untouchable. Some contemporary readings connect her to the deep trauma of slavery and the suffering of enslaved women exploited by plantation owners. Read that way, La Diablesse can become a form of supernatural justice, striking the kind of man colonial society often protected. Other tellings keep her more purely supernatural, an old spirit of the cane fields and quiet roads entirely separate from any specific historical grievance. Either way, by the 1800s, she had become one of the most recognized figures across Trinidad, Dominica, Martinique, and St. Lucia alike. She was especially well known among rural workers, cane cutters, and anyone whose path home required walking isolated roads after dark. These communities developed specific practical rules for staying safe, treated with the same seriousness as any other piece of survival knowledge. Rule 1. If you meet an unusually elegant woman walking alone on a dark country road, be immediately suspicious, no matter how ordinary the encounter feels. Rule 2. Always look at her feet before anything else, even if it means being rude. A single glance is usually all it takes to know for certain. Some tellings, if you realize too late, turn your clothes inside out immediately. People say it can break her hold completely. Rule 4. Never travel isolated roads alone late at night if you can avoid it, especially coming from somewhere you'd rather not explain to your family. Rule 5. Dogs are said to sense her presence long before any human does. Unexplained frantic barking on an empty road at night is treated as a serious warning sign. Families who took these rules seriously describe generations of men who came home safely, shaken but unharmed, after brief, unsettling encounters. Families who dismissed the legend as simple superstition, according to the stories, produced most of the tragic versions still told as cautionary tales today. Even today, in more rural parts of Trinidad, St. Lucia, and Dominica, the legend of La Diablesse hasn't faded the way many older folktales have. Older relatives still half-jokingly warn young men leaving for a night out to watch which roads they walk home on, and to watch their company closely. Joseph, the man from that specific Trinidad account, reportedly never walked that same stretch of road alone again for the rest of his life. He was, by every account from people who knew him afterward, a notably more faithful and more cautious husband from that night onward. Whether that change came from genuine supernatural terror or simply from a very effective, very memorable scare, the practical result ended up the same. That's arguably the real power of this particular legend. It doesn't just frighten people, it specifically reshapes behavior, generation after generation. A beautiful stranger on an empty road, a warning hidden in a single glance downward, a simple trick passed down through grandmothers for centuries. It's a remarkably efficient piece of storytelling, precisely targeted at exactly the kind of man most likely to need the warning. Today, if you ask around rural Trinidad or St. Lucia, most people will tell you they don't really believe in La Diablesse anymore. But ask the same people if they'd stop to look at a strange woman's feet on an empty road at midnight, and most admit, after a pause, that they probably would. Because somewhere on one of those same quiet roads, according to the story, she's still out walking. Patient, elegant, and in absolutely no hurry at all. And if you ever find yourself walking home late at night, further from the main road than you meant to go, remember the one piece of advice that survived centuries. Look down before you look up. And if you don't like what you see, turn your shirt inside out and run. Advice that survived centuries. Look down before you look up. And if you don't like what you see, turn your shirt inside out and run.